Hi everyone, it's Kenna Magana, and I'm here today to talk with you about integrating Writing Revolution with Tier 1. I know there is a lot going on this school year, and I want to make sure that I provide you with all the support I possibly can to help you with implementing Writing Revolution without it being a huge extra task for you in your classroom. So our agenda today, we're going to look at some examples of Writing Revolution assignments. Then we're going to explore what that looks like with Tier 1. And then we'll talk about how to teach the Writing Revolution skills. So let's take a look at some examples of Writing Revolution materials. On the Writing Revolution website, they actually have pre-made assessments and assignments and examples of what you can use right on their website. So let's look at what that looks like. You do need to sign up for this. So it's a free account. It doesn't cost you anything to have an account, but you do have to sign up for it. Whenever you go to their website, underneath services, you want to click on online resources. And you want to click here to access the book resources page. Then you'll have customizable templates. We're going to take a look at some of those in just a moment, but they also have activities for students. So these are some already pre-made activities that you can utilize in your classroom with your students. You'll see that they have the title of, or the topic of what it's talking about. So this one, very hot topic right now, Miss Amanda Gorman. So if you wanted to go over a little bit of information about her with your students, introduce her to introduce your students to her wonderful work, you certainly can do that here. So you can identify based off of what you're currently working on with your students, which one of these activities would work best for your students. So let's say my students have been working a lot on providing questions with answers. I want them creating some high quality questions so that way whenever they're reading a text, they're able to formulate these questions as they read. So we've been practicing a lot of that in my classroom. So I would want to do this activity with my students. It's going to open as a PDF. And you'll see that it is going to, on page 2, it's going to have the actual article link. And most of these are going to come from Newsella or other reputable sources where we usually get supplemental information for our students. So the article link is there. Then on page 1, that's where you have where your students could write their questions and with these given answers. Now, this is one that's already created. I like this because I like to use it as an example of what I could do in my classroom, what this could look like with my students with the content that we're currently discussing. So you'll see they have a lot of topics, and right now, because we are in Black History Month, they have so many topics here. Just very rich articles that your students could read and y'all could discuss as a class, do this work with it, and it's going to help enrich their knowledge of the wonderful people who have contributed to our society as we celebrate them during Black History Month. Of course, you don't have to just do this for Black History Month. It could be done any time of year and should be. So you'll see all of these here that are already created and examples of what you could already use. Use these in your classroom as they are, or you can use them, you've really been focusing on one of your units. Let's say you're in 5th grade, you're planning to start your Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe unit coming up soon. And so you want to see what kind of work could you put together for your students based off of the reading that they're going to do in that unit. This is a great place to come to get some ideas of what that could look like. Now, in addition to having these examples already made for you, they also have customizable templates. Here, you're going to see these templates for all the different areas that you learn about in the Writing Revolution training. So beginning with the sentence fragments, just the basic sentences, all of these are right here. You have the because, but, and so, adding of positives, sentence expansion. That's personally one of my favorites. And then, speaking of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for 5th grade, in that unit, the students have to do a lot of summarizing. Well, this is a great place for you to practice with what you've been teaching your students, helping them kind of put all these other pieces together to their summary. So they have these here, and let's take a look at what they look like. So here's what the sentence summary looks like. And this is a PDF, but it is editable. So you can type on it and you can share it with your students, and your students will be able to type on it. I would definitely recommend downloading it and utilizing Kami or Google Docs, something of that nature, just to keep it as simple as possible for your students and for you as well as you go through with grading. So here on the sentence summary, so they have the question words, and this is of course editable. So if there's a piece in here that you don't need, that's not appropriate, let's say where. Let's say that's not appropriate to what your students have just read. You can delete that. So you can customize these templates to be used in your classroom with your students, however is best suited for your students. Right? So they have these here, use them as guides, use them as templates. Let's say that your students are doing some reading and you need to provide them with some additional background knowledge. I highly recommend coming to this site and looking to see what they already have available, what kind of text with activities that's already there. So that way you can use that with your students to help build background knowledge for them and to support them in whatever it is that they're learning in their current unit of study. So there's tons of pieces in there. Just make sure you go and explore that. And like I said, you do have to sign up for it, but it's free. All right, so we took a look at the website, saw some great examples on there, and then kind of saw how we could use it in our classroom. So when we're looking at the materials on Writing Revolution, the pre-made materials, those are wonderful exemplars. Hey, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe we need to take what's there and we need to adjust it to fit the needs of our students and in our classroom. So we can use those materials that are on Writing Revolution, but we can also use them as exemplars to merge that Tier 1 with the Writing Revolution lessons that we've been doing with our students. So what this looks like with Tier 1. Whenever I'm planning, whenever I'm taking a look at a unit, whether it's guidebooks, wit and wisdom, my perspectives, I ask these questions as I'm going through planning to see where my work with Writing Revolution is going to fit in. So I think about what my students need to know and what they need to be able to do by the end of that unit. Then also, what does this look like in my Tier 1? Now, it could also be something that my students have demonstrated through their work, that I can see my students need additional practice with XYZ, and so I can integrate that in my unit. But because I'm actually planning for my unit, I can see where that would best fit in. Then I also ask myself, what should be the focus of my Writing Revolution mini lessons? Now we do know that so many of these pieces of Writing Revolution build upon each other. So we can't just start with writing a summary. We need to go through that process with our students and see and kind of build them up to be able to get to that sentence writing. For example, you wouldn't have them do that full outline before they've done a single paragraph outline. They need to build up to that. We need to give them lots of practice and opportunities to build those skills. So these are my 3 questions that I look at whenever I'm planning merging my Writing Revolution with my Tier 1. Because I'm going to be honest with you, there are some times in some places where it's going to fit, other times in places where it's not going to fit. Don't force it. Don't force it. If a text or the activities or the questions or the expected learning of that unit is not aligned with anything that you're doing in Writing Revolution, it doesn't merge with those skills, then that's not the place to do it. Look elsewhere in that unit and see where it would happen. It needs to be a very natural process, and it shouldn't be anything that's done in isolation. Now, keep in mind, we did look at those examples of exemplars that we could use in our classroom with our students. We wouldn't just pull those out of the blue. We would make sure that we're merging them with something that we're already learning in our classroom. So let's start taking a peek at what this looks like for our different curricula. I pulled these two slides over here from guidebooks. These are from the 5th grade unit, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So the top one is the slide that comes first, and then the bottom one comes after that. So basically the students have read a couple of chapters of this text, and then they're answering these questions about what they've read. They're answering these in their reading log. So instead of using these questions as they are over here, I could change these questions just a bit to kind of get a 2-for-1 assessment. I would be able to see, do my students understand what they've read? But I'd also be able to check and see, do my students understand how to appropriately use because, but, or so when writing a sentence? So I would change my questions to, what sort of character is Mr. Tumnus and how do you know? Be sure to use because, but, or so in your response. Now, because I've done many lessons with my students on this, my students are very familiar with this process. They get what this looks like. We've been practicing because, but, and so for so many lessons. And this is when I'm assessing them. Or it could be a time where I've done this previously. I had some students who were struggling. We did some small group work separate from our whole group lesson with that small group of students. But I just want to kind of reassess everyone at this time. Make sure that my students who previously showed mastery, make sure, just a little refresher for them or another opportunity to practice using it. And then my students who I did some reteaching with, let them be reassessed as well. So this is what I would use in my classroom. And I have my hot tip down at the bottom, use the online templates. Here's one for a sentence expansion. I looked at my lesson in guidebooks for The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And one of the things that they should have pulled out from there is that the White Witch is mean. Because at this point, they actually haven't met the White Witch, but they've been told about her from this other character. And so what they've been told, it's a very negative perception, and she's perceived as mean. So that's a very basic sentence. The White Witch is mean. Well, I want my students to expand upon that. I want them to tell me how she's mean, why, and who is giving them this information. So I would have my students kind of fill this out. And remember, when we see these dotted lines over here, students do not have to write complete sentences right there. If it's a dotted line, it's just a simple note. So just some notes for themselves. Here, where we have the solid line, that's where we want to see their full expanded sentence where they're putting all of that together. So I took one of those templates from Writing Revolution website, added my information on there. I used the 3 questions that I wanted to do, question words that I wanted to use that were appropriate to this activity. I put it together, and this is what I would give to my students. This question, where it asked them about the White Witch, is actually on the very next slide in that lesson. It asked them to tell about the White Witch a little bit more. And so this is a great opportunity for my students to tell me what they learned and how they learned. And I'm hoping that they see when I'm asking who's giving them this information. And that's something I would clarify with my students. Who's giving this information, or how do you know this? Make sure that they're catching that point that right now we just know this character through word of mouth. Because that's an important part for me understanding, do they really truly understand the pieces of characterization? So those are some examples of what it would look like in guidebooks. Now, wit and wisdom. I was going through a wit and wisdom lesson, and there was this question on there for the students, and it says, in your own words, what big ideas do you learn from the narrator in these first 3 pages? Name 3 big ideas. This is another wonderful place for your students to use because, but, or so. Again, hot tip, use those online templates. We're working smarter, not harder. You have so much on your plate right now as you're teaching during a pandemic. I want to make sure that you're able to use resources that are going to be effective and maximize instruction time and minimize time of you actually having to make stuff. Also, in the this unit that the students are going through in Wit and Wisdom, they have to write a lot of summaries. This is also in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That's another great unit in guidebooks to use this. Any unit where you have your students where they're going to have to be writing a lot of summaries, we want our students to be comfortable and able to produce high quality summaries that kind of hit all the buttons. So use that summary template and edit it to be appropriate for what your students have just learned. So if they didn't talk about the how in there, in what they just read in that chapter, delete it. Take that out. It doesn't make sense for your students to answer that. They don't have that answer. They can't respond to that. Don't put it in there. All you do is just highlight it and delete it. So use those summary templates, whether you're using it for Wit and Wisdom, you're using it for guidebooks, or you're using it for My Perspectives. You can utilize these templates to make it work for your students. So now let's take a look at My Perspectives. In one of the units, I believe this is a 7th grade unit, the students are asked to speculate based on what they've just read in this story. So it says, the fate of the original colonist is not specifically described. What do you think will become of the rescue team, and what story details support your idea? We know how important it is for our students to back up what they say with evidence from the text. Having them use because, but, or so is a great way to have them kind of summarizing those ideas that they're getting from the text, and then they can cite their textual evidence to follow that. But using those words, it's a great way to do a little quick check with your students. Again, use the online templates. Now let's talk about teaching the skills with Writing Revolution. I have experienced some teachers doing an amazing job. Actually, most of the teachers I've seen doing Writing Revolution lessons in their classroom are doing such a phenomenal job with this. We know that we need to use our Tier 1 curriculum in our classroom with our students, but we need to find the time to teach our students these skills that we learned about during our Writing Revolution training, whether we went through the training or we had someone at our school redeliver, or you've been following my video series. We know that it's important for our students to have these lessons, but they should be mini lessons. And when I say mini lessons, I mean short, sweet, and to the point. These should be 7 to 10 minute lessons that we give our students about, maybe using because, but, or so, or doing a sentence expansion, or the single paragraph outline. Short, concise lessons where we're going over this information with our students, teaching them these skills, and then giving them the opportunity to practice throughout our guidebooks unit for that day, our lesson for that day, or our Wit and Wisdom, or My Perspectives. We give them that short piece of information. We give them the opportunity to apply what they've learned. We use that information to decide what does our mini lesson the next day need to look like. If all of our students have it, then we don't need to spend more time on it. However, we know that most of our students aren't going to get it the first time. So we're going to need to have multiple short mini lessons where we're talking about whatever particular skill it is that we're on at that time with Writing Revolution, and then giving our students the opportunity to practice. And as I mentioned earlier, sometimes a text that you're reading in your unit is not going to be conducive to a Writing Revolution practice activity. Don't force it. It needs to be a natural connection. It needs to be a natural flow. If the students are not meant to summarize, that text, if it doesn't make sense to summarize what they learned, then don't do a summary with that. See if there's something else, maybe something that you've been reteaching that you could bring back and assess then. And with that being said, you don't have to assess every single day with Writing Revolution. A couple times a week would be good. 2-3 times a week would be a great opportunity for you to see how your students are progressing with their skills in Writing Revolution. And we should begin to see their writing, their end of unit writing really improving. And that should be another checkpoint for us to see where our students are and what additional supports they need. So I want to thank you so much for joining my session today. If you have any questions, you can email me. My email is here on the screen, kmagana@ebrschools.org, or you can join my office hours later today. Check the catalog to see when my office hours will be. Thank you so much and have a great day.